Welcome to Atlas Live, Atlas Public Policy's live video podcast that brings together industry and policy leaders for lively discussions on the future of clean technology, transportation, the built environment, manufacturing, climate change, and more.
All right, welcome to the next episode of Atlas Live. I am super excited to be joined by Kiran Bhatraju of Arcadia and Zach Axelrod of Redball Energy. I want to say Red Bull. I'm sure a lot of people want to say that a lot.
That's where it came from.
Yeah, there you go. There you go. Well, what makes me not just most excited, but is partially because you guys are here in person with me, which is a really like big milestone for us. This is our first full episode of Atlas Live in person. So thanks for joining me in our office in DC, guys.
Thank you so much.
Great.
Appreciate
it
it
here.
Awesome. And so before we get into the show, we're going to switch it over to Matthew Vining of Atlas, and he's going to give us a quick overview of what's going on in the clean economy. Over to you, Matthew.
Hi, everyone. This is Matthew. I'm a policy analyst over here at Atlas Public Policy. I'm looking forward to chat with you today about some clean energy deployment developments that we're seeing here. As most of us know, power demand and electricity rates are both expected to rise in the coming years, which is increasing pressure on policymakers. And a key to working with this challenge is the deployment of clean energy. In collaboration with the Environmental Defense Fund, we at Atlas put out a series of reports, with our most recent one looking at the end of 2025 and the progress and challenges we have seen thus far. To start with, when we look at the data from a holistic point of view and top down, we see that the United States saw a record 49 gigawatts of clean energy capacity come online. Now, this is the equivalent to about 23 Hoover Dams worth of electricity production. In addition to that, there's about over 210 gigawatts still in the pipeline. That's projects that are planned or undergoing current construction, which is nearly 5 times as much as fossil fuels. So a large share of this is actually expected to be online either this year or the following year. And when we think about the technologies that are producing this capacity or that hold the potential to power the grid, we see a lot from solar power and batteries dominating, about 85% of that pipeline capacity. These projects also represent a significant economic opportunity. In fact, solar energy itself will lead to an estimated $176 billion in investment, while batteries another $113 billion. And so batteries and solar are really seeing this unprecedented growth in the country relative to a smaller baseline. In fact, battery capacity itself is expected to more than double by 2031 when it's connected to the grid. Through the end of 2025, Texas led all states for clean power capacity, more than double the next state, California. So we're really seeing this state emerge as a leader. And while we saw a lot of progress this past year, there's also been some challenges to that build out. Specifically, when we look at the data historically, we saw a steady rise from 2018 to 2024, but 2025 had slightly less than anticipated, creating a potential stagnated growth line. Specifically, when we look at the data, about 13 gigawatts of clean energy were delayed that were expected to come online in 2025. However, most of that is expected to now come online this year. Additionally, about 13 gigawatts were outright canceled. A lot of this came from offshore and onshore wind, but as well as some battery storage projects as well. So where does that put us? Well, when we think about what's in store for this year, continuing on, we have to acknowledge that there was quite a bit of growth. But at the same time, there is some significant hostility from federal government towards wind and solar power specifically. This includes Department of Interior restrictions and cancellations, congressional cuts and revisions to tax credits, as well as some Department of Energy grant program cuts that would have otherwise supported continued clean energy development. So while there are some challenges to go through, it's clear that regardless, the power capacity coming online is largely dominated by storage, batteries, and solar power, underscoring both the resilience of and expected continued challenges for this year. Thank you.
All right, thanks a lot, Matthew, for that overview of what's going on in clean power deployment. So let's get into it, Kiran and Zach. We're here to talk about commercial solar. I think first we got to level set and tell everybody what we mean by that, because commercial solar could mean a lot of different things. So why don't we start with you, Zach, and tell us what does commercial solar mean to you, and where's your business fit into that?
We're about 70% residential, 30% commercial. I think commercial solar breaks down into apartment buildings and laundromats and, the kind of 150, 200 kilowatt, bigger than a home, but I mean, true small business world. Then you've got warehouses, and I think that's a totally different universe. We touch on that. That's about as high as we go. And then, of course, you get into really the community solar world of, big facilities transportation hubs, and then you start to get to ground mount. But we do everything rooftop and kind of subscale projects.
And you're based here in Washington, and where do you all serve?
We serve DC and now Connecticut, Rhode Island, Massachusetts as well.
Nice. So Kiran, your company covers a lot of ground when it comes to solar. So tell us about where you guys fit into that puzzle.
Yeah, we historically we still own a huge share of what is the largest community solar manager in the country. So about 3 gigawatts of community solar, as Zach said, is sort of your like 500 kW to 5 megawatt projects that could be ground mount, mostly roof. And that's a subsidiary of Arcadia, where we manage those across 16 states. And at Arcadia, we work with something like 1,000 plus enterprises, where we're helping them on that journey to figure out how much can I save with solar, how much can I save with batteries, and that is everything from hospitals to retail to industrial to commercial. So that big missing middle of really buildings that can or have solar.
So now we got some level setting going on. Let's talk about how I'd love to hear how you both would characterize what's going on in the state of commercial solar right now, because obviously there's a lot of tumult in the energy markets, generally speaking, but drill down into just tell us about what's happening in commercial solar right now. We can start with you, Zach.
It's not good.
Yeah.
I would say I'm very bullish on the long term, and I'm very bullish on a couple of years from now. But there's a shakeout happening, and I think we can separate out commercial solar financing from what it looks like for an end consumer. And I think the long term, as rates go up and there's the ability to manage tariffs through storage, there's a lot to be excited about. And there's a lot to be excited about with customers, and that includes commercial customers owning their own systems and kind of taking control of their own destiny.
So what's tell us about like what's driving this shakeout right now that you're talking about.
I've been in and around commercial solar for 20 years. Commercial solar financing, which financing has driven more than 50% of all solar deployments in the US. It's very hard to point to people who've made money at that. It's extremely difficult to finance bespoke small assets. And I'm defining small as anything, like Kiran said, the kind of 500 kW and down.
Mm-hmm.
You go long enough where people haven't made money. And again, it's because of the bespoke nature of all the different types of financing involved with tax equity, debt facilities. It's just tough. And so you layer on big, beautiful bill, and you layer on kind of global instability. And I think it's made financing very difficult in the short term, which is leading to challenges for EPCs and contractors, developers.
EPC,
that's a short term. I'm sorry,
energy performance contractors,
or engineering procurement.
Oh, okay.
Construction.
Okay.
But again, just wrapping this up and putting a bow on it, it is difficult in the short term because financing is a challenge.
Yeah.
Pretty bullish on where this is a couple years from now. But right now, kind of a lot of uncertainty, and that leads to contractions in financing, and financing has driven so much of this industry. So it's a little uncertain today.
Yeah, I just to piggyback on that, I think it's like both an incredibly complex time to make the decision to go solar for a host of reasons that I think we'll talk about. But also, as prices go up and panel prices continue to go lower, and storage prices have gone down 80% in the last decade, it's sort of this paradox market where you've got these incredible signals of cost savings and hedging against the future to do commercial solar, but at the same time, like massive complexity with FIAC rules and tax equity structures and some of the sunsetting that we'll see based on the bill that I know Zach's dealt a lot with,
like the tax credits and such. You're saying that's adding to the complexity. What else is driving this complexity that you're talking about?
Tariffs, interest rates. The FIAC rules, which are the foreign entity, the amount of foreign sort of components in the system itself. But again, those are the complexity's always been there for solar. The benefits when you have, so at Arcadia, we have the largest database of like distribution level tariffs. So this is like how energy is structured, the price. And usually there's three components there. There's consumption, obviously, like how much you're paying per kilowatt hour from the utility. There's a fixed cost, which is the wires, which is how utilities are really driving up rates.
Mm-hmm.
And then you have demand. So this is like the peakiest moment. So demand charges often is how commercial customers tend to talk about them. If you want to affect consumption and demand charges, which are some of the fastest growing parts of the rate structure, solar is your best bet. And there are folks who installed solar. We were just talking about this before the show started, like 5 years ago, 10 years ago, who are sitting pretty, who are sitting on amazing hedges to, their competitor who's paying higher and higher energy prices. So the complexity has always been there. It's always made it hard, but there's like never a better time to choose solar or storage, frankly, than now.
So Zach, I want to get back to you on this just because this complexity and this transition piece, we talk a lot about that and this in the clean economy and generally. There's always this like, well, it's cost more upfront, but you save money in the long run. And over time, the cost of the technology keeps going down to a point where it becomes no brainer. Are what you saying earlier, where you said in the sort of not the next couple of years, but maybe in a few years from now, is that when it becomes a no-brainer for this kind of solar and energy
I think
production?
we're at no-brainer levels for a lot of people today,
Mm-hmm.
and we've passed the point of no return. I think a lot of us have been in the solar industry for 20 years, and there's a question of, are we going to make it? And that question, I think, has felt settled for some time. Who makes it and how quickly we get there, and whether we get there fast enough is very much still in question, and how fast we need to put the pedal down to defeat climate change. But there are more and more applications of solar and storage that make fundamental economic sense today. I think where I sit in the ecosystem, there's just so much shakeout right now of different business models. And so you're going to see a lot of turbulence.
Mm-hmm.
To people who aren't in the industry, that's noise, right? To me, that's my day-to-day livelihood. And it's the livelihood of a lot of the people that I know, which companies will make it, what financing structures, which contractors have built good, sustainable businesses. From a policy standpoint, it's important, but I try to also step back and say that the customer making a decision, that isn't their life, that's my life.
Mm-hmm.
There are good decisions they can make today. And what I'm very bullish on in the medium and long term is, as rates go up, the credits don't matter. Fiat doesn't matter, right? It's a 30% tax credit, but if rates go up 40% in a 3-year period, well, the first 15 years of my career, fundamental electric rates didn't go up by 40%, almost an aggregate.
Right.
So there is a sea change that is very pro making this decision.
Mm-hmm.
The turbulence and the noise that I live day to day doesn't matter to that business owner who's making a decision. And I think that we're going to get past that soon.
Interesting. And so, Kiran, when you look at like the role of commercial solar and what it's going to play as we look at not just rising electricity rates, but rising just demand for energy more generally, what Matthew was showing us earlier is that most of the new utility scale power that's coming onto the grid is batteries and solar. Are we seeing similar things? Are we going to see similar things play out at the community scale level or the commercial scale level? It's one critique I've always heard of, whether you're talking about rooftop residential solar or these other small projects, is because it's so niche and small, it's hard to really get good scale and get good unit costs on it relative to utility scale. Is the market conditions going to be such that that's just going to be overcome and it's going to be that no-brainer that we were talking about?
Yeah, I think so. Community solar, which I've been obsessed with for almost a decade now, maybe both of us have, is this like sweet spot of customer access,
Mm-hmm.
where you don't need to have a power plant on your roof. You don't need to have the space. You can still connect to a solar project.
Mm-hmm.
And then for the developer, the independent power producer, you're getting on some scale like utility scale level economics because it's a larger project. So you're buying more panels.
How much is that looking like? Like what's the?
I mean, there was a point
energy
a few years ago. I'm not sure if this is your question, but there was a point a few years ago where it was the single best infrastructure project for somebody to invest in America.
Wow.
Because the IRRs were so high, right?
Mm-hmm.
And this goes to, you were getting a great value for the solar you were producing and paying even lower costs when you build at scale. So community, I think, continues to grow. The demand is massive. It is mostly limited by like state regulations, right? There are 16 states that allow community solar.
Mm-hmm.
Again, this is a lot of energy terms here, but front of the meter distributed generation. So there's only 16 states that allow it. It's a state level policy that a Public Service Commission has to create rules for. Because it's on the distribution grid. It's not transmission connected, right? And so we had this growth. It was at one point the fastest growing energy market in the U.S. And a few years ago, we've seen a bit of a pullback. I think as more and more utilities see it as competitive to their business, but we'll continue to see that grow. I think customer demand is what's growing that market. And then broadly, just on, I think you were asking sort of what are the barriers to commercial? A lot of people who are running their business, they just want lower bills, right? And
small businesses,
exactly.
Underserved communities. These are people who, the electricity bills mean a lot.
Actually, I would say there's actually two things we're seeing in the market. Obviously, as long as I've been in energy, you give someone a lower bill, their ears perk up, they'll pay attention. So that's fine. And just having faster pathways to give someone a proposal that says, hey, I can save you on your energy bill. And we can talk about a lot of that is what we work on around data. So giving you the counterfactual of like, if you were on the utility, here's what happens. If you have some amount of solar and storage, here's how you can hedge your costs or lower your bills. But the second thing I'm seeing from businesses specifically is when they think about growth, they are now having to, like a CFO or a COO is now having to consider which utility markets are we going into? If I'm buying a new building, if I'm buying a new distribution warehouse, if I want to add, if I'm cold storage, we have a customer who's like a grocery chain. They're now contemplating as part of their modeling for their business growth, which markets actually allow us to increase power. Where can we do solar storage? Where can we, and what are those costs going to look like? Because not everyone's an AI hyperscaler that's getting value from.
But so is in those markets, is it like, am I looking at just the power market itself, or are those businesses looking at how can I bring my own power? Or
both. So I guess that's 2A and B. It's like, is this a state? How are power prices growing in this state? What does the outlook look like? And then second, can I interconnect faster if I have a battery or if I have solar? And that is a real question that I think is being answered right now by a lot of commercial solar installers. Is like, if you want speed, you hear this about speed to power, helping put some on-site generation is helping. And we have a customer, it's a cold storage company that is now integrating their growth plans with their energy team on like where can we get the fastest path to power, and how much on-site solar and storage do we have to put in place to make sure that we can get there faster.
And Zach, explain like what happened. Is it just about the rates that have gone up so much in such a short period that now this has become a CFO level decision, or is it other factors?
My analogy for this, for your viewers who probably well-traveled, you go to Middle East or Europe, Asia, and you're even in the nicest hotels, your key card goes into a slot when you walk into your hotel room, and the air conditioning doesn't work unless you do that. Somebody has to be in the room. People in other countries have cared about the price of power for a long time. We have not. CFOs didn't pay attention to this because nobody paid attention to this. No one paid attention because it was cheap. But I've gone to other countries 20, 30 years ago, and people were paying attention to power. So again, my use case of that is maybe glib and simplistic, but everybody else around the world has had to pay attention because relative to their incomes and relative kind of a national income, power has been much more expensive than it is here. That is maybe changing for the first time in our lifetimes. And I think you do see CFOs paying attention to that when nobody did before. The reasons for clean energy for the last 20 years and the decisions people made have been policy driven, certainly. And that policy is not just environmental, it's low income. And almost all of our businesses is at the intersection of environment and low income and communities. And I'm very proud of that. But these were very policy driven and state level programs that were meant to jumpstart the solar industry over the fact that we had cheap power in the US and we had an environmental problem. Now the fundamental prices are just going up, and everyone seems to believe they will keep going up. I believe they'll keep going up. But that is new in our lifetimes. The CFOs never used to care, and now they do.
Yeah. And I guess when I think about what you just said, I circle the word climate here, because that's one of the climate change issue is one of the fundamental reasons we had policy, especially at the federal level, in place for so long to encourage this technology. You guys haven't brought that up yet. That doesn't mean that we don't care about it, of course, but it sounds like what you're saying is the driver of where solar is going to be, what makes you say it's going to be so bullish is not because of future climate policy that's coming that's going to make it really attractive. Back in the time when I moved to DC, we were talking about cap and trade and putting a price on emissions.
Yep.
We're not talking about that at this moment in time. So that means to me, you're not anticipating that kind of policy to make the market better. You're saying the market fundamentals are such that it's going to be
I think that's
competitive.
The case, but I want to got us to a place that when rates went up, the infrastructure is here, the companies are here, the technology is there. I mean, and infrastructure broadly, the financing infrastructure, the construction infrastructure, it was not a given that would be here. And so now, as we've had these price shocks and global issues around energy that we're living through right now, we have spent 30 years, thanks to public policy, getting us to this place where it is the number one source of energy that we're bringing online, and there are the jobs in place and the people who actually know how to deploy, whether it's 10 kilowatt residential systems to now systems that were unimaginable in scale 15 years ago, 500 megawatts in the desert. You have to have the infrastructure, the policy put in place, but now on a go forward basis, pretty bullish with or without further policy enhancements.
Is that the way your business is looking at it too, Kiran?
Yeah, of course. Every customer, there are still customers in America that care about their sustainability. They know that they're going to outlive a single administration, and so they do care about their carbon usage. That being said, solar and storage is just fundamentally better technology. It's distributed generation, which means it's at the edge in the building. It's quiet, it's clean, it's incredibly cheap. Like a panel, you probably know better than I do. A panel made in, probably made in China, but even what soon will be in the US, it's like 20 cents a watt. That's just fundamental. For at least some people that are listening, they'll understand just how fundamentally cheap that is.
Do you remember Moonshot, whatever it was called? Solar.
Trying to get it below $1.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, that was the.
And so yeah, but cost is the fundamental decision maker, and the halo is that we can take advantage of the carbon abatement that comes with it.
So we've talked about policy a few different times. Obviously, last year there was a big change in federal strategy around clean energy. In particular, the big beautiful bill put a sunset on tax credits for solar. They also made some reforms, but did not nearly hit as hard the battery tax credit, right? 45X. I'd love to hear how you guys are looking at how batteries fit into your offerings to customers right now, because as Matthew said, it's batteries and solar that are the big winners at the moment in terms of what utilities are expecting to bring online in the near term. That's a big change, particularly the batteries part. There was always a lot of wind and solar coming on to the grid, but having this much battery capacity coming on is a big deal. So how does that look like with your customers? And we'll start with
fundamentally, like, solar is the fuel and the battery is like, that's the prime time. Like, if you're going to lower demand charges, let's say at 8 p.m. for your business and the sun is not out, like, the battery is the one that's delivering an enormous amount of value to the grid, to the utility, to the customer. And we've seen this shift from companies we serve with data that moving from maybe a single value proposition of just solar to sometimes storage first, actually, for a commercial customer with high demand charges.
So they're going to ask that.
And then backing into solar to lower consumption charges. And again, I go back to like the 3-part rate structure, the fixed costs, which are hard to move. Yeah. Which is, you've seen the CAGR on those at like 20%, that utilities are growing that. and then demand and the consumption. The demand, right, that peakiness with an aging grid, like that is the thing that is going to continue to spike. You see like 20x differences between, in the Texas market, which is like a fully liquid market, in pricing of crazy volatility. There's a rate structure in, or even, PJM capacity market prices, right, which is a great view of like volatility and future peak demand, spiked to a level that I think like scared most people, both consumers and producers of energy. So the battery is going to become the value prop, I think, over the next decade because of the way our grid is and just the spikiness of power costs.
Yeah. Could you share a little bit too, Zach, about like, when you look at that battery value prop that you just mentioned, is that like, is that independent of the battery chemistries? Like we see LFP, we see new versions of lithium ion coming into the market soon. Some people, and even iron-based, but other types of batteries that have different chemistries that are cheaper, essentially. So tell us, does that matter at all, or is it just having any kind of batteries where you're going to see a value prop?
Having known you only for a short period, you're an engineer and I'm not. I'm not well versed in that.
Yeah.
To be candid, I am well versed in the fact that over the 20 years that I've been in this business, battery costs per unit of capacity and energy have come down quite dramatically.
Yeah.
Financing them has gotten easier. Getting them out to the edge of the grid's getting easier. That's my knowledge lies on that side. I wish it was more in the chemistry side.
I think for distributed for commercial, I don't think we're going to see anything beyond lithium ion in the next decade.
That's sort of what I'm asking. It's like, in a lot of cases, we're waiting for the next version of some piece of technology to come into the market or be, scalable. And what I'm
now
is
the form factor will change. So instead of just a sort of, Powerwall type single battery on the wall, I don't know, Zach's worked on this in the past, so you can talk about it, but like, the form factor of the battery behind an HVAC system, a battery attached to, like, Carrier's working on this, for example, or a battery. There's a company that we work with where the battery's attached to an induction stove. And so I think copper,
yes,
an impulse, and the battery in your EV, right, being bidirectional. So I think that's the more interesting use case for commercial, industrial, and resi.
Well, I don't say resi too, because as somebody who works, my whole career has been at the edge of the grid. So much of the decision making, like around batteries in a home, batteries is a net consumer of energy, right? It's about load shifting, definitionally. And so residential, speaking of residential for a minute, residential rate structures are usually flat. So there's not a lot of incentive to that. In some markets, there's grid incentives for participating in the capacity market. There's reasons to put storage at the edge of the grid, but so much of the reason as a consumer that I would allow that relate to form factor over economics,
right?
Because the economics are there for a homeowner, but they're marginal. I've spent 20 years trying to put stuff in people's homes. If there was a battery that was a part of my HVAC system, if there's a battery that's part of my induction stove and I don't see it, and you're telling me it's going to save me $5 a month, great. If, on the other hand, you need some of my New York City or Washington, D.C. garage, of which I have very limited square footage, and I worked at a company called GridPoint almost right out of school, where we had this thing that was the size of a refrigerator, and it weighed 7,000 pounds. It's not joking. Really, really cool technology. But it's like, okay, but it's going to take up a quarter of your garage.
Yeah. People
are buying homes for hundreds of thousands of dollars, and you're telling me that to save $18 a month, you need a quarter of my garage?
Yeah.
Not relevant.
Yeah.
But you've told me I could save $5 a month, make the environment a better place, and it's built into my air conditioner. Sold.
Yeah.
These are the types of developments that I actually think matter the most. And there's some people, as Kiran mentioned, a couple of them, where people are making like real strides in the form factor that you put these into residences, small businesses, even mid-sized businesses. I think that's going to drive adoption as much or more than economics have and will.
I love this because we're just about at time, and my last question was about the biggest opportunity. That sounds like what you're saying is the next phase of this is to try to sort of integrate energy management systems into the stuff that you already need, such that you're not really asking people to do something else. Did I hear you right?
that to me is the number one. For again, I focus on homes up to mid-sized businesses, so I can't speak to the large businesses, large business world. But I think the missed opportunity has been the understanding of what actually drives consumer, and I'm defining consumer broadly as homeowners up through small businesses with single decision makers. They're still a consumer. They're not presenting to a board. I own a condo or I own an apartment building. I own a car wash. I'm making a decision. Again, economics are a core part of it, but I think as an industry, we've forgotten that some of their economics are things like, no, you can't have X percentage of my space because I need that space for other things that to operate my business. I think as an industry, we've done a very poor job of that until quite recently. And so I'm rather bullish, but it's taken us way too long as an industry to get there to understand that like saving people a little money, saving the environment a little bit, but having a form factor that's unobtrusive, actually a massive driver of real world adoption versus all of us playing with our spreadsheets saying like, this is the best, so let's go for it. And it's really not the best for a consumer. So I think that's the missed opportunity.
Over to you. Last question. What's the biggest missed opportunity to unlock more
This
deployment?
is going to be a little wonky, but I feel like the people watching might appreciate it. State lawmakers and public service commissions have it within their power to change how their markets are structured. Community solar is a great example. We just need more price signals than the utility, right? So I think that's like in the hierarchy of things to do to unlock a lot of what we're talking about. It's more price signals that or exposure price signals that say, hey, if you lower power at these times, you can transact and send power back to the grid. You can make money. Those things really matter to deploying batteries and solar. And then interconnection rules and laws. Like even where we live, it's still often like 4 to 6 months to get your solar turned on. And it's worse out west. Like those things can be changed by local lawmakers who are like engaged, which I think everyone's really engaged in power prices for the first time. So,
wow. Yeah. Really fascinating conversation, guys. And I really appreciate you both joining me in person at our office here in DC. So that brings us to the end of this episode of Atlas Live. I'm your host, Nick Nigro, and stay tuned. We've got another episode coming up shortly. All right. Thanks, everybody.
thank you.